Greetings, everybody, and welcome to another installment of the Listening Eye podcast, The Secret Feminine Within. I am one of your co-hosts, Brandon Jones, and I'm with the lovely Erin. Erin, how are you doing on this Mother's Day?
I'm doing great. I can't wait to talk about our parents, my mom specifically.
Absolutely. So, a nice parenting edition of from a millennial perspective, right? I always say I'm an old millennial. I'm on that early in or the late in, I guess, of millennials and Generation X. But I think that it's interesting because the stuff that went down during our parents' teenage years and 20s has definitely impacted who and how we are. And we have a different kind of experience growing up with our parents and our caregivers than others, which a lot of our caregivers ended up being grandparents, which we'll also get into. But yeah, is there anything special that you want to kick off with this Mother's Day edition? Anything you want to throw out there right away?
I guess I just want to say that when we start talking about our parents, I hope all the people that aren't millennials don't get offended.
Uh oh. What do you mean by that? Go a little deeper with that one.
I mean, like, I feel like I know that the grandparents' generation can be completely different from the parents' generation, but
Hmm.
it seems like the remnants of the grandparents' generation kind of got on our parents too. But it's like in their own way they tried to rebel, but it still was like that old school feel where you're just like, okay, like I feel like millennials and especially Gen Z, like we took it to a whole nother level. Like maybe because of technology, but I just
Hmm.
don't want no Gen Xers to be like, oh my god, you guys.
And now more millennials are parents, and some millennials are grandparents. I just seen somebody post on Facebook earlier today that they welcomed their grandchild. I'm like, damn, this person's like a year or two older than me. I was like, good lord, but that's how life is and stuff happens. So let's talk about your upbringing. Let's start with you.
Okay.
Um, we've had some talks behind the scenes. You talked about not growing up with your dad. I have the same kind of scenario and situation on my end. So tell us a little bit about growing up for you.
So growing up with me for me was very like I feel like I was kind of like in my own world a little bit. Like my family, my mom's side of the family, they're like basically like artists, right? So
Mm.
like my mom, she was a hairdresser. My her sister after her, she's a sculptor, and her baby sister, she wanted to get that fame, early 90s fame. She left, Michigan, went to New York when she was 17 and went to a dance school. And she was like, when MTV, what was it, when they first started doing music videos, like, and having those like after school kind of specials, like she was on
Hmm.
MTV. She danced for a lot of famous people. She used to work at Sony Records as like
Wow.
a receptionist. So like my family has always been really, and my uncle, like I get upset with him, but he's like a closet kind of installer. Like he likes to build things. So
Mm.
he built his wife like this wine bar, and like he's so good at like building things. But he's all like, oh, I gotta have a job and stability. So he didn't do the whole art thing. But
Mm.
basically everybody in my mom's family are artists. And I think growing up here in Ann Arbor was good for artists if you were white. But if you were black, it kind of felt like you had to leave in order to try to be famous. And that's why my aunt,
Mm.
she's in Cleveland, and she was like, I would have never made it as an artist in Ann Arbor. So, like, I feel like my family kind of scattered because they are artists.
Mm.
But me growing up specifically, anyway, in that type of environment, no boundaries, no
Mm.
type of, because artists are just like, I'm a 3-year-old baby and I'm sitting at the conversation table with all the adults. Like they're just, because they're not in that
Right.
kind of stability, like I'm the father, this is the child. Like it was just like, what do you think, Aaron? Like, yeah, so yeah, I'm just sitting there talking.
Hmm.
And like, yeah, that baby's kind of smart. Or you know how like kind of like that beatnik type of like openness. And so
Right.
I think growing up for me in that type of environment was good and bad because I never felt like I couldn't do anything. Like I
Hmm.
never felt like I couldn't stay out with my friends or, do things that seemed a little bit too grown for my age.
Hmm. Hmm.
But yeah, that's how it was for me growing up. Like I just think that it was like I need to learn. I needed to learn boundaries, and that came as I grew older. But when I was younger, it was like everything kind of meshed together, and it was just
Mm,
all, especially in the form of like a creative process. It was just all about the creative process, and so
right,
I was a part of a lot of art projects.
right. Interesting. Interesting. Okay. So you grew up with artists, family members. Boundaries was one of those things that, that you need to learn as you got older. What was your grandparents' role? Because I know you said that your grandparents helped raise you. Were they artists as well?
I think in the sense like when you think about art, like you think about painting and stuff.
Hmm.
No, but like my grandfather, he was a farmer in Mississippi
Okay.
before he came up, so I feel like that's like an art form in itself. And he worked on cars, so that's like an art form, like building things. And my
Hmm.
grandma, she was a housewife, but she was very into like theater. Like she put on the Christmas play at the church, and they let her like write the script, and they let her like direct it. And so I feel like she was an artist in her own way, but like since they were straight from Mississippi to Michigan, it's
Mm-hmm.
like my aunt said, like I couldn't be no artist in Ann Arbor. And so when they first came up here, my grandma, clean houses for white folks. And my grandfather, he ended up working, in the factories and stuff. And he actually got a good job in Ann Arbor, so that's why he came to Ann Arbor with a third grade education. He basically was like an engineer. But back then, you could,
Mm.
if you knew how to do things, I don't think they really kind of like looked into stuff like that.
Right.
So they were artists too, but like they had to be a little bit more stable.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. I think one of the parallels between your family's history and mine is this kind of Midwest discovery period, right? So you have well, I'm not gonna say ancestors, like they're way back there, but you got your great grandparents coming from the southern states, moving up to the Midwest, seeking economic opportunities. Your folks land in Ann Arbor, Michigan. My
They're in
folks,
Detroit first.
they're in Detroit first. Okay, so they were in Detroit, then eventually into Ann Arbor. Similar to my mom's side, my great grandparents landed in Danville, Illinois, which is interesting because I visited that city. We had a family reunion back in 2011, and it looked just like it did when my grandparents got there because it was. I mean, they nothing changed. They had like a Sears and a convention center, and that was like the two biggest things in there. So it was crazy. But by way of Danville, Illinois, to the Twin Cities of Minnesota, again seeking economic opportunity, which is important because a lot of Black folks, um, especially Gen Xers, who are in the Midwest, that's their story. And Isabel Wilkerson talks about that in a book called Warmth of Other Suns, where she
Mhm.
looks at kind of the journey of Black Americans from the South to the West to the upper North East Coast and the Midwest, and a lot of that was due to fleeing racial terrorism, racism, and economic opportunity. So it's interesting that that your folks ended up where they did in Michigan. So yeah, so for me, when it comes to, I would say that my grandparents helped raise me to a certain extent. I feel like I always had a really good relationship with my grandfather, who's not my mom's biological dad, but he's always been around. Um, we did know his biological her my well, we did know my mom's biological father as well, my actual grandfather, but he wasn't as engaged with us as my, I guess he would be my other grandfather. My grandmother um definitely helped raise Mom Ruthie. That's what we call her, Mom Ruthie. She's not even, she probably might pop in. She was on my live yesterday. She likes to pop in on lives. But yeah, so my grandma, I mean, she had a huge influence, I think, on raising us, not as like a mom figure, really, but just like as a grandma. Like she always kind of kept us in line. As I got older, I lived with her. So she gave me a lot of wisdom. I remember we used to have these talks all the time. Like she would just talk to me about family stuff, life stuff, and just really give me a lot of game on how to live and survive, which I always found very fascinating. Um, but then, yeah, but I grew up with my mom, and I talked about the domestic violence and stuff that my stepfather was a part of. He was in and out of the house a lot, and I wouldn't say that he was really like a father figure. Like I don't remember learning much from him at all. Like I don't remember much of anything. He might have taught my brother stuff more than me, but And then I found out that he wasn't my dad like a few weeks before my 12th birthday. And when I found that out, I actually did meet my father. I did meet my biological dad, but that relationship never panned out to anything. It was just like I know, I met him and then was just like back to normal. Nothing, didn't see him, didn't talk to him. It was nothing. And then that just maintained even to this day. Like we're
Were
connected
you
on Facebook.
relieved?
Hmm?
Were you relieved to know that he wasn't your biological father?
Yeah, yeah. I was trying to remember where have I told this story. It was an interesting thing. So I was at my grandmother, the one I just talked about, Mama Ruthie. I was at my grandmother's house. Actually, she lived with my great grandparents. So I was at their house, and I had just came back from the store. In the Twin Cities, we have Super America, or now it's known as Speedway. And I would always get like a Sprite and a Snickers, and that would just be my thing. I would always get a Sprite and a Snickers. And I remember I had just got back from the store, and my grandma was like, "Boy, sit down. I gotta tell you something." And I'm thinking I'm about to get my butt whooped. I don't know what I did. I'm terrified. I'm like, "Oh man." And she says, "I gotta tell you something. You need to listen." And you know, when grandma tells you you need to sit down and listen, you about to get it. Like something will happen. I'm like, I don't know what I did,
You all
but
nervous?
hell yeah, I was nervous because she don't play. My grandma is the grandma that tell you go get a switch and then tell you go get another one and then go tell you get another one. Then she'll tie them up together. That's her. So I'm thinking I'm about to get it. I'm about to get it. But she said no. She said Michael's not your dad, and I remember that very vividly. And I just started crying. I was scared. I think I was relieved, but I was more just like confused. I'm like, wait, what? How is he not my? But it was just like, thank God, because I'd never really liked him, to be honest. Like I never liked him. Like I'm not even joking. He always treated me different. He always treated me different, and so when I found that out, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what that meant. Like, okay, now that I know this, what's going on? And I remember, like, there used to be these times when I was growing up. So my stepfather's name is Michael. My brother right under me, his name is Michael as well. So he was Michael Jr. So I would always ask my mom, like, why didn't you name me Michael? My mom would always give me these like half truths. And one of the half truths is she said, well, I didn't name you Michael because when I was pregnant with you, I used to watch a lot of soap operas, and there was this character named Brandon on one of the soap operas, and that's why I named you Brandon. She just never told me that he wasn't my dad. So I always thought that's why my name was Brandon, and she just finally wanted to name a son Michael. That was my other brother. But then when my grandma told me that, it all made sense, right? So it's like, okay, great. And once I knew that, yeah, I was relieved, but it was weird because when you're 11 years old, what do you do with that information? Like, I don't know. I didn't know what to do. And I knew that he knew, and then he just started to treat me different. Like he just treated me different than he would treat. It was just like now that the secret's out, now I can just fully just kind of just ignore this kid or treat him the way that I wanted to in the first place. So I thought, I think that kind of created a rift between my mom and my grandma too at that time. Like I remember it was just weird between them two because I don't think that I was supposed to know. So,
Yeah.
yeah, that was fascinating. And I actually remember meeting my dad. I met him like a few weeks later on my birthday. I went over to Minneapolis where he is. He's not that far from where I was at in St. Paul. And I remember him coming late. I remember playing with a bunch of kids that look like me and finding out I got all these sisters that I didn't grow up with. And it's my birthday, so it's the 4th of July. There's a barbecue, there's music, there's food, there's all this stuff. But I'm in North Minneapolis. Now, North Minneapolis is notorious for that's where all the black people live. So that's where all the crazy stuff happened. I'm a St. Paul kid. So being in St. Paul, you get the same racist propaganda as anybody else. So I'm thinking I'm about to die. I'm about to go meet my dad and die on my birthday. Like that was my thought at like 11. Like I'm gonna get shot going over north. But it was nothing like that. It was cool. There was no issues. It was nothing. So it was like just that anxiety that I might not return home was crazy. And then yeah, he came late. And when he came late, like I was like disappointed, but I was happy to finally like see him, right? And I remember on the drive back home, I remember telling myself, like, I can't depend on men. Like I got the stepfather who's the abuser, and I got the my biological dad who doesn't give a damn because he came late. And I was just like, and I kept this kind of idea, like, I don't really need men. I'll figure out. I'm a man now. I'm 12. I had a little hair under my underarms, had a little hair on my chin. I was just like, I was feeling myself. So I was like, I don't even need men. I'm going to move on. And I remember carrying that kind of idea, like, you can't depend on black men, probably till I was like in my mid-20s, like early to mid-20s. Like, I remember in college, like, I didn't have a lot of male friends. I was cool with all females for the most part. I had a couple of dudes that I was cool with. but I always kept my circle real small because just like black men, I just couldn't trust them based on that experience with my dad and my stepdad. So yeah, so those were the influences between them. Now, the main male figure that I probably did have was my grandfather. Well, he was always there for me, always talking to me and stuff like that. But it was just different. When you don't have a dad, it's just very different. So yeah, that's a little. Now my girls are fighting. Go ahead, ask a question. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I did. That's
Okay.
all right. Marley, I'm a big guy. He's sleeping. He's taking a nap. But I feel like I had a similar situation, but I found out when I was 3. Remember I told you I was at the
Wow.
table?
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
So like I'm sitting there and I'm like, all geeked up because what happened when my mom told me before she passed away, I don't know how relevant this is, but she went to prom with this guy, her prom date, and they were like super in love and everything. And she was like, and my grandma, mind you, every time her daughters went to prom, she made them wear white dresses. Like, we're not getting married, but my grandma was like, y'all gotta wear like it's
Get
a
ready for
thing.
the wedding.
Oh my God, yes. So like she went to prom with her high school sweetheart, but like they ended up breaking up, she said, because he didn't want to be her first. Because he was just basically like, I don't want to deal with that headache, all that clinginess, whatever. That's what he was
Right.
saying to her. So she was so totally heartbroken, and she was just like, "This is some BS. I need a real man." Blah blah blah. Lo and
Mm.
behold, she meets my dad. My dad is like 9 years older than her, so she's like
Mm.
19. And I'm thinking in my head, like, so when, like, I'm like, wow, he was like 28, like, he had a life before
Mm.
her, so I'm just like, so where did I meet at? And she's talking about the bus stop. I'm like, what? Like, I was just like, okay, so he didn't have no ride? Like, what are you talking about? And she was just like, yeah, he was going through it or whatever at the time. I was like, all right, whatever. But like, so I was kind of disappointed by that. But then everybody was always just like, yeah, your dad, he was just like so fine. Like he was just like so good looking. Like, everybody in his family was real good looking. He was just like that type of dude or whatever. And so I could understand like why my mom would be so geeked up because she's a young girl,
Right.
and then she got her heart broken. So, long story short, like she ended up getting pregnant with me, and then she was scared, and like the whole family was like, "Oh, y'all gotta get married now." So they had like the shotgun wedding. She was 7 months pregnant. They went to the courthouse. Mind you, they went to the courthouse in Ohio because you can annul a marriage contract in Ohio a lot easier than you can in Michigan. So they
Mm.
crossed state borders to do that. But long story short, they got married, and she said he was a horrible husband. He was
Wow.
abusive and just this monster. So before I found all this out, I was sitting at the table, and mind you, after she broke up with my dad, she got back with her high school sweetheart, and they ended up
Mm.
having my brother together.
Mm-hmm.
So I was just like, so I was thinking that was my dad because my brother's only 18 months younger than me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm just like, oh, I'm so geeked. Like he's about to come over and pick us up, and I'm like 3 years
Yep.
old. I can't wait to see my daddy. I'm geeked up, and my grandma just comes out of nowhere, and she's just like, that ain't your daddy, and I'm like,
Mm.
like you're a 3 year old. You're three
Right.
years old. Like you're just like, and I'm looking at my mom, like how like little kids have those big eyes and those big
Mhm.
old like juicy freaking tears coming out of their eyes. And I'm just like, what is this true? And my mom was just like, yeah, sure is. And I'm
Wow.
like, so then you don't know what to do because you're just like, well, who is this mystery person? And then for the longest
Right.
time, you hear stories, but you don't know what they look like. You don't know how they are and stuff like that. So I was just like sitting there, like it just seemed like ever since then, like he was still nice to me, my stepdad, but I noticed like around the age of like 10, he started to kind of like wean me off and be like, oh, it's boys' weekend. I'm
Yeah.
hanging out with just my son. And
Yep.
so it kind of just was like, damn, man, like I don't have nobody now, and so long story short, like that was just hard for me because it was like I started to resent my mom because it was just
Mm.
like a lot of things that she didn't tell me. Like she was
Mhm.
not trying to open up about it. And I know it was painful, but my grandma would always be like, she needs to go out there, she needs to meet her people. You need to take her over there. And my mom would be like, no. And it was always a big deal. She always felt like she had to look good. Like she was like,
Mm.
I can't go out there, my car is messed up, or I can't go out there, I don't look right, I gotta get some new clothes. And I'm just like, what is going on with these people, these mystical, magical people that you're talking about? Because it's just like, why would they care about that? And I'm their family.
Right.
And a long story short, I met them later on in life, like I think probably like right after Marley was born, and they was just regular as hell. Like I'm just like,
Mm.
I don't understand why she was like so freaked out. But my mom was like, they come from something, they got land, they got, she was very insecure about it. And it was just
Mm.
kind of like, it was just really weird because my whole teenage life and everything, like I was totally rebelling against her. Like I was just like, you don't care about me. Because she would always say little things like, I don't know where you get that from. I know you don't get it from me. Or the fact that I wear glasses. I'm like, where did I get these glasses? And then she's like, oh, your daddy wears glasses. Like, it's just like, okay. Like, it was just always something. And I
Mm.
remember after I met his people, before I met his people, I had did this ancestry test, and I found out I had a sister that was 9 months younger than me. And
Mm-hmm.
then so it kind of went back into the story of like him being who he was, because
Mm-hmm.
my grandmother and my aunt told me that this woman had came to their house. She drove my mom's car to the house, and she was crying because she didn't know it was my mom's car. Because my
Mm.
dad said it was his car, but she looked in the glove compartment and saw who it was registered to, and she was
Wow.
just like, "I can't believe." So when they told me that story, I'm like, "Why would you tell me this? I don't care about some woman showing up. Like, yeah, we know he was like that, but I think that was my sister's mom." And
Mm.
so it was just like, and my sister was so mad. She was just like, because my dad never said anything about me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
he was always like, you're my daughter, you're my oldest daughter, and all this stuff. And then all of a sudden, here I am. And she's just like, why didn't you tell me? And he's like, her mom wouldn't let me see her. So he basically just wrote me off like I
Wow.
wasn't his. But
Wow.
he knew I was, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Man, it's some parallels of our stories again. And I want to ask a question because it is Mother's Day about moms too, but the parallels is like I have a sister who's like 10 months younger than me too. And I have an older sister.
Okay.
Um and my older sister, I think she might be like 2 or 3 years older than me. I don't think I met her though, but I met like one of the craziest things that had happened was back in like 2011. I think it was before I was married. It was definitely before I got married. So probably like 2011, a bunch of me and my siblings found each other on Facebook. And then we like coordinated this lunch together. So we all met at like TGI Fridays, and it was just it was probably one of the weirdest things I've ever been around. It's like all these people are my siblings. We all look like they all kind of had like a relationship because they knew each like they didn't, I don't know if they knew each other that well, but they knew of each other. I was just like the mystery kid. Like everybody was
Right.
like, we got a brother. And I
Yeah.
didn't know what to do with that. It was so weird. And then nothing really happened afterwards. I got invited to like some family outings and stuff, but it was always awkward as hell. Like I didn't know what to do because I was just like the mystery kid. Like I'm Junior Man's oldest son, like this mystery kid, and it's crazy because I look like my dad. Like I look like him. Like that's the other thing too. So it's funny because they may be watching this because we're all on Facebook, like connected. But it was always just awkward. Like to know I had sisters. I remember when I was working at the hospital. I was like 17 years old. This woman had come to me. She's like, "You don't know who I am, do I? Do you?" And I'm like, "No, I don't know you." There's some woman that works at the hospital. Like, she's like, I think she was my dad's cousin, like his sister's daughter or something. She was like, "I'm your cousin, and you got a sister." And she would like give me this phone number. She's like, "You should call your sister." And I'm like, "And say what? Like, what am I supposed to do with this?" Like, "Hey, I'm your brother." Like, it was just so weird. But like, people knew like who my dad was and all that stuff. But
Right.
I had no idea. I was just a big mystery.
It's
But
right up under your nose. Right
yeah,
up
even to this day it's weird. One thing I wanted to do before COVID last year. Last year was like 2020, so I was like, okay, I need to heal from my traumas. I need to like work on some of the things that I haven't worked on, and I was going to try to like connect with my dad. I was like, I had this idea. Of course, I'm always thinking create some content, right? Put my trauma on the front line. I was like, I should do this thing because I was writing this article called "Fathering Without a Foundation." And I was like, I should turn this into like a little documentary series. So I think this would be a good healing moment for many people. Because I was talking about my issues around being a parent. because I didn't have a dad, and how like I don't have a foundation to really work from. I have all this book knowledge and all this stuff, but like I didn't have that one-on-one experience. So I was like, you know what? I'm gonna reach out to my dad and try to do like a little short film. Like we should sit down, me and him, like in some nice chairs, nice little dark backdrop, and just have a father-son conversation. And we talk to each other, have some talks. But then COVID happened, and I was like, yeah, I ain't gonna do this idea now. But I thought that would have been pretty dope, and it still could be a dope idea to like see that happen in the moment, because there's just so much just missing information. But one thing that happened for me growing up was like I didn't. There was a point where I didn't even want a relationship, because I was like, I don't know what the point is at this point. I just was crystallized, or just like I don't know what to do. Like, do I ask him for help? What do I do? Like, how do you build a relationship with your dad after 2 decades of him not being around? Like, what do you do with that? So that was just very interesting, because it was like, dang, I had the same situation, like this mystery sibling, but I was the mystery to everybody else. So yeah.
I think that I was too, and I think when I think about it now that I'm older and I'm a parent myself, that some things we're not supposed to know. Because the thing is like I feel like when I met my sister for the first time, the one I told you that I met on 23andMe, she invited me to her house, and I met her wife at the time. They're not married anymore, and basically her wife was shocked. Her wife was like, "I cannot believe that both of his oldest daughters have degrees." Like the way my father was, people are shocked that his children could be successful. And so I was just cracking up, because it was just like, I mean, she looked just like me as well, of course, because so close in age. But her experience was just, it was riddled with trauma, even though she knew him. And she told me, she said that, sometimes it's better not to know. Like, can you imagine how your life would have been if you would have known him? And so I'm thinking in my head, like, this whole time I'm missing this big part of me. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, yeah, I don't know. Like, it's not fair. And then she knows, and it was still painful. Like, you know what I mean? Like, it was, and I feel like, honestly, on her part, I feel like it was more painful for her. Because she ended up losing her mom at a young age. And, it was like drugs, foster care, all that stuff was involved. And I just be thinking, like, damn, like, I am really blessed. But at the same time, I feel like now that when I met him, I was pregnant with Marley, like maybe 5 months. And I met him at a food bank, actually. I saw his name on the list, and I approached him, and I said, excuse me, are you Tony Jenkins? And he said, yes. And I said, do you know who I am? And he said, no. And I said, I'm Aaron Jenkins. And he was like, oh, hi, daughter, how are you?
Wow.
And so that was the first time I met him. So, and I was just like, and so I was sitting there telling him, I was just like, I'm pregnant, and, we're going to have a son and stuff like that. And so he was just talking to me, and he was just talking about my mom, like his memories of my mom, but he looked like he was going through it. Like he looked like he was like mentally unstable and things like that. And so, you could kind of feel the sadness of the interaction. So I kind of like tried to make him laugh, because I was just like, the one memory that I remember that everybody told me about of you. And he said, what? And I was just like, everybody used to tell me how fine you was, and so he started laughing. Like it like made him smile. Right. And so I just felt like in that moment, like I totally had to forgive him. Like it just felt very like, I can't hold on to this anger because there's no point. You know what I mean? Like look at him. You know what I mean? Like, and I just felt nothing but like empathy and just like I'm just like blessed to be here kind of thing.
Right.
And it was just like right after that, like I didn't even see him. He didn't wait after to try to talk to me. He did give me his phone number, but I ended up, I was like, I can't. Like, it's too much. You know what I mean? But it was like the interaction was just like, he reminded me of my mom, because my mom had a mental illness before she died. So it was just like, if I can show this person love, I can show this person too.
Right. Absolutely. Wow. Thank you for sharing. Wow. Man, that has to be very difficult, because that wasn't that long ago. You're like, your son's not that old. So that was just a few years back. That's wow. I had a situation similar to that when I had my first daughter. we were at home and I had invited my dad. I don't. This was me trying to reach out, connect, figure something out. I invited him over, and he came over. And this is in June. Yeah, came over and we're sitting there on the couch. He's holding the baby. We're chit chat. It's me, my wife, him, and the baby. And we're watching the Little League World Series. Right? It's like nothing's on TV in June, so we're watching the Little League World Series is on, and it sparked me to tell him a story about when I played baseball. Now I played baseball for like 2 seasons. And this is like little league baseball. I was awful. I was so whack in baseball. That baseball was not my sport. I couldn't hit to save my life. But the second year that I played, we were in a playoff game and we're about to lose. And guess who's at bat? Brandon. Brandon strikes out, game's over. So everybody's like, "Oh, we lost. It's a wrap. Brandon's up." And I finally hit the ball. It was like Sandlot. I finally hit the damn ball. And I saved the season because I made a play. And we actually ended up winning that game, but we lost the next one. So I'm telling him this story. And then towards like the end of the story, I'm like, "You should have been there." And it just was like super awkward. Like I was just like, "But you should have probably been there. Like I shouldn't be telling you a story of my childhood." Like like I didn't know what to do with that, and I just was like, "Okay, I gotta dead this conversation because this is just weird." But again, that level of forgiveness I think is important in your story. And when it's one of those awkward things I don't think gets talked about enough, is like, as a child you have to forgive your parent for the trauma or the experiences that they've had that we don't always realize. And that's what I had to do. I couldn't blame him for not being there. I don't even know the circumstances to why he wasn't, but even as an adult, you still feel that pain as you were as a child. It's just like, damn, like I'm telling you a story about my childhood when you should have been there. You should have been the person that was coaching me on how to hit the ball and all that stuff, but you weren't. And I think that part of our healing, especially as millennials, because so many of us have these just fractured parent-child dynamics, like you have to forgive to a certain extent. You have to have what I call transformational forgiveness. Like in order for you to keep moving forward, you're gonna have to come to grips with what happened, and you can't blame anybody. But there's a lot of shame in that, I think, too, for the parent. So I want to throw a question out there because this kind of brings up the question I was going to ask earlier. What do you think it was for your mom and my mom, just mothers in general who go through this? Why don't they tell us about the other parent, or why do you think that kind of protect the child, don't give the child information? What do you think that's about?
I think specifically for me, since I'm a girl, my mom didn't want me to know. Like my dad, he was a drinker,
Mm,
and it's not necessarily like he was a drunk. I don't know. I know his
mhm.
family drinks, and my mom, to me, she wasn't very go with the flow. She's very
Mhm.
like business. This is what you need to do. You need to handle this. You need to handle that. Like very Capricorn type of energy. And my dad to me seems like the stories that I hear, like he seems like an artist. Like my mom comes from an art family, but she
Right.
totally like didn't become a hairdresser. You know what
Right.
I mean? Like she's like, I gotta get out here. I gotta do, I gotta be the workaholic. The whole American dream. I gotta work really hard and not really go into her own lane like she was
Mhm.
supposed to. And I think that my dad came into her life at a time where she was just very young, very heartbroken. And maybe he was trying to loosen her up because when I talked to my sister, she had a completely different outlook on when she grew up with him. She said he was very fun, very loud, very like,
Wow.
if he got some money, it was like a shopping spree for the kids, and the whole house was like all these plants, and he was just like a very loving life type of guy. And that's not the story that I got from my mom. But the thing
Right.
is, like, I feel like she wouldn't have been able to see him as the artist that he was because she was looking for somebody to take care of her. You know what I
Right.
mean? She was a young woman. And so the thing is, it's just like she didn't want me to know certain things because, one time she said that my dad gave her like a weed brownie, like an
Mhm.
edible. And so, like, I'm just cracking up because I'm just like, wow, really? Like, because here I am in high school, as a high schooler, you try out marijuana, you try and,
Right.
different things, partying and stuff like that. And she's like, I don't understand you. I don't understand why you're being so like this and low. And I'm just sitting there thinking, like, you ain't never did nothing like this ever. And
Right.
she's like, no, I would never do it. Like, total lies. You know what I mean? So then it's just like, I think what you said is the shame
Mhm.
that you were with somebody that made you feel so good that you felt like it wasn't a good thing. Do you know
Mm.
what I mean? And
Yeah.
so, like, he loosened her up to the point where she was upset that he did that. You know what I mean?
Mm.
And so it was to the point where I felt, because I was just like, you had a baby, and then I know I shouldn't be putting her business out like this, but I'm gonna say it. You know, one, she's gone, so she's not thinking about this. But like my mom was still messing with my dad when my brother was conceived. So the thing is just like, because my stepdad told me that he was just like, yeah, because my dad, when she called my dad and told him that she was pregnant and it was over, he was like, is it my baby? Now, when she told me the
Mm.
story, I'm a young kid, so I'm just sitting there like, why would he ask you that? Like what you said with your mom when you were just like, why you didn't name me Michael? My
Right.
mom was all like, I don't know why he would ask me that. That's just such a crazy question. We was been over, stuff like that. And I'm just like, all of a sudden I'm finding out it's a love triangle. All
Right.
these things. She didn't want me to take on that behavior. So she's like,
Right.
oh, I don't say nothing. But I'm like, for you not to say anything, I'm out here trying to test out everything because I don't know where I fit in. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I think that was more trying to protect me, but at the same time, it was just like horribly executed because
Mm.
you could have just been straight up with me and I'd have been like, you know what? I don't want that. I do not
Right.
want that.
Right. Wow. Man, that is very interesting. And again, I think as us being millennials, there was something about that time period. I would say from the late 70s pretty much to like the mid 90s where our parents were just a different they were just doing stuff. They were living their best life. I'll just say it that way. I don't know if it
Yeah.
was because of the music and the drugs and excitement, but I think that was like the generation that just like kicked off turning up. Like it went from like Soul Train to like Freaknik. Like it just went like for two different things. And and it's like, damn, what ended up happening was you had so many children from that generation who have these stories like what you just told about your parents and this love triangle. Like that is a lot of people's story. That is a lot of young people. And now here we are as parents at that age. Some of us are grandparents, and it's like we're trying to fix those broken cycles. We're trying to heal that trauma that has happened within our family, but it's hard because a lot of us have partial information on what actually happened because it's like these half truths and this stuff. It's crazy. And when you start learning this stuff as an adult too, and I've seen this with clients that I've had, um, it's interesting because it's like, damn, they could have just told me that. Like that wasn't that big of a deal, but it's like that shame and that guilt. And I think that comes for that generation ahead of us. I think that comes from the generation before them because
Yes.
so many of their behaviors were so taboo. They weren't supposed to be doing things. They weren't supposed to be showing their legs or their shoulders. And you got women who are starting to like, be liberated. They're starting to have cleavage out and stuff like that. But the generation before them really shunned that. So once they start having babies and they have multiple different partners and the pill is out. So now you got birth control. Like you got all this stuff happening. And now, boom, that now you have shame because we weren't raised like this. But we're living the culture caught us, right? Where
Right.
society was going caught them, and they were just doing their thing, right? The disco era and all that stuff. And now here we are, 20, 30 years later, and it's like, damn, like the stuff that they have gone through to us is very minor. It's like, that's it, that's all. But to them, it was probably like a huge piece of shame. Like it was stuff like they shouldn't have did it because their generation behind them really shunned those things. What do you think about that?
I think you're absolutely right because it's funny. Like my mom didn't want to tell me anything, but my aunt, who's a sculptor, who's like 2 years younger than her, she said when she first started having sex, my mom was like, "Okay, you need to get the phone. You need to get condoms." Like she was just letting her know, and
Yeah.
I'm like, "What?" Like I'm like, "Who is this person?" Like to me, my mom was like Mother Teresa. I swear to God. She was always out here like, I'm a virgin. I'm like, okay, but you got 3 kids with 3 different people. You know what I mean? And she's just like, yes, well, immaculate conception. Like it's just like she never wanted me to know her. And I just
Right.
felt like very hurt by that because it's like I'm your daughter. Like the things that you're going through, most likely I will go through. Like the cycle will repeat if you don't try to break
Mhm.
it. You know what I mean? And so
Absolutely.
thank God, like for birth control. Thank God for all the things that we have because it's just like when you're out here and you're just basically like trying to find yourself, you
Hmm.
things like that happen. You end up having a baby. You end up, in these different relationships that you might not be healthy for you and things like that. And it's just like I was just like, oh my God, like when these things started coming out, and even at her funeral, like
Mm.
my brother's stepfather, I mean, my stepfather, my brother's dad, he was up there on the mic talking about, yeah, she was my first love. She had a big ass booty. I'm like, she's like in the ground. Like, what are you talking about? Like, it was just this whole, like, this whole thing. And I was just like, this is kind of disrespectful. I get it. Like, he's going into his memories and stuff. And it was funny because when I was young, like maybe 3 or 4, that's like when Martin was out, like really big
Right.
and stuff.
Right.
And so I remember like they used to stay up late together and they're young too. Like, remind
Right.
you, my mom's like 21, 22, and she's got these 2 babies. And they're like, go to sleep. And they're up like watching Martin and watching all these like early 90s shows, the Tyson
Hmm.
fights and stuff like that. And they had a water bed. And so I'm
Hmm.
just sitting there like, okay, mom, what's going like I'm like when you start thinking about things, you start thinking like, damn, mom, what's going on with you? But it's just
Yeah.
like by the time I became a teenager, she's totally like, I don't want that for you. And I'm like,
Right.
hell, I don't want it for myself either. But I mean, damn, say something, say something. You know what I mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
out here learning everything on my own. Like, she's like, my mama never told me nothing. So I'm like,
Mm.
I get it.
Wow.
Your mama straight from Mississippi, like to the point where she married a man that she did not want to marry because she got
Hmm.
pregnant. You know what I
Right.
mean? So it was just kind of like, yeah, she didn't tell you anything, but you would think that, okay, by the time it came to you having kids, you'd be like, let me tell my daughter everything.
Right. Right. Man, you brought up two real good points. Um, man, like I don't think we realize like I think our parents' generation was the first generation where well, I would say where it was more acceptable where having multiple babies young and being on your own was like a thing. Because I think what used to happen when because women get pregnant at all different ages for a long time, but I think we used to have more like tighter community. So like you could just have that baby being taken care of everybody, like auntie's there, grandma's there, or sometimes you'll see it in the movies where they'll send the young person's baby off to go live with someone else. Um, but I think our parents' generation was the first generation where it really was just like, okay, you're 21, you got 2 kids, here's an apartment, here's some wick, do your thing, and it's just like our parents were young as hell, man. Like, can you imagine? I couldn't imagine having a baby at night, multiple babies at like 21 years old. The stuff that I was doing at 21, I understand why our parents did the things that they did because they were young. They were super young, and
Yeah.
it's like it's very and I think really they were the first generation where that kind of independence. I don't know if it's independence or what I would call it where it was like encouraged, like get your ass out my house. You 18 now. You grown like that. You grown thing. That's what the you grown syndrome. Let's call it that. So you 18 now. Goodbye. And it's like, damn, our parents were young. Like I
Yeah.
think that's like a real life. I think I just like connected a dot here. It's like, damn, they were young. They didn't know what they was doing. They was barely
Frontal
making it
lobe, not even
themselves.
developed, not even developed.
It's
That's
wild.
Does
But
she I just feel like too, like even like what you just said, like you got your own place, you got, some food stamps, some WIC, you think you doing something, right? Like my mother-in-law, she said that she was like, yeah, when I got pregnant with Darius, man, we was getting all the good snacks. I'm like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, like I'm just sitting there like, what are you talking about? So it's just like I think you're right, and I think that it was set up that way.
yeah,
Do you know what I mean? Because
yeah, absolutely.
it was a big generation of that. Like you would think, okay, because I would think if you didn't get nothing, you would stick together with the person. You know what I
Right,
mean? But since you getting everything, you like, man, I don't need you. And
right.
then too, it's like the remnants or the residue of that. Like when I had Marley, or no, when me and Darius first started dating, going back to our parents' generation, people were like, if y'all have a baby, just don't get married. But if y'all have a baby, you can get all kinds of like,
Yeah, stuff.
assistance. And I was just
Yeah.
like, what? And then they were just like, and then when I did get married, they were like, just don't put his name down on the paperwork because you could get
Mm,
more. you don't say that you
I
got
mean,
somebody with you. And I'm like,
they were encouraging you to be institutionalized and get caught in this what I call a trap. You know, when it comes to like welfare and assistance, like that stuff's there to help you move forward, but so many people just stay stuck in what I call a dependency loop, and it just like generations on welfare with with vouchers to live in apartment buildings and stuff. It is crazy,
and
man.
it's totally different. It's totally different for white folks. They look at it like, okay, this is gonna help me out, but I'm not gonna be on it forever. Like when
Right.
I talk about welfare, I talk about like when I was younger, before I actually kind of looked at it in a different way. I used to be like, damn, I don't never want to be on welfare because people just stay on welfare. But I talked
Mm-hmm.
to this old lady, she was like in her 80s, and they had to have it because of the depression. This old white
Mm-hmm.
lady,
Yep.
she
Yep.
was like, we loved it because it helped us
Move
get, it helped
forward.
my husband become a cardiologist. It helped me
Yep.
go to nursing school. But I'm like, what? Like I'm
Yeah.
thinking like, okay, if it helped you, why is it not helping us? And
Mm-hmm.
so the thing is like, and my grandfather always said when we were growing up, he said the government will only give you enough to starve.
Mm.
He used to say that all the time because he was just like, he was a person that worked with his hands, and he speaking of my grandfather, he had two wives. I would say my grandma was like a what's that wife that you have that you don't marry, but common law. So they
Common
never
law. Yeah.
got married, but they were together for like 7 years. And then he had his first wife when he came to Detroit, and I don't know if he was still with his first wife, but his first wife was a very modern woman. Like she was like, "This ain't
Mm.
Mississippi. I know I got these 6 kids, but you ain't about to keep me in the house. I'm about to go out and make my own money, like
Mm-hmm.
whatever." And so she left. She basically left him because he was like that old school type of like,
Mm-hmm.
So that's when my grandma came on the scene. He knew her. They were from the same hometown. He actually knew her older brothers because he's 8 years older than my grandma. And when she finally came up to Michigan, he was like, "Oh, let me start talking to you. I know you." And my grandma was the type of person where, okay, I can be a stay-at-home wife. So she, that's how they got together. But when she first got pregnant with my mom, he ended up getting a lady pregnant
Mm.
too. And she got pregnant with twin kids. And I was cracking up because I was just like, and I was like, how did they meet? And his sister lived in Ann Arbor. His sister was first come to Ann Arbor, and he built his first wife's house, so they lived real close to each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the lady was his sister's friend, so he used to go over
Mm.
there. He was a handyman. So he said, she, took advantage of him because he was at her house working on stuff. And I was like, okay, grandpa, okay, whatever you say, you know what I'm saying? Like she did, she took
Right.
advantage. And so it was just cracking me up because the story, my aunt used to come over to my grandma's house with her mom, and my grandma would offer them coffee and just be very sweet. And I
Mm.
remember I was like trying to put the dots together when I was like 17, and I was like, hold up. Okay, you not Leola's kids,
Mm.
and you not Eileen's kids. Who are you? Like I'm just trying to figure this out. And so when they finally told me the story, I was like, yo, why she in here eating cookies and drinking coffee? Like, yo, we should be
Mm-hmm.
pissed, right? And they were
Mm-hmm.
like, Aaron, that was so long ago. Like, mom ain't tripping about that. And I was thinking, like, well, what happened when, it went down when it first happened? My grandpa, my mom was born in December of 68, and the twins were born in March of 69. And so and so he was like, man, he came to my grandma, he was crying and everything. And he was just like, I need to tell you something. And he told her, and he was crying because they mama was like, if you don't stay with me, I'm giving these kids up for adoption.
Mm.
And so these are his kids. Like he's a
Yeah.
family man. So he's like, what? So he had to come clean and tell her, right? So my grandma, they said my grandma said, okay, you said you messed up. Let's go get these kids, and I'll raise all three of the kids, Barbara and his twins.
Wow.
And I was like, what? What kind of woman does that? You'd be pissed. Like she was just like, and by the time they got to, because I think it was in Ohio, they drove down from Michigan. She already gave up the kids for adoption because he didn't choose her.
Dang.
He didn't choose her. So
Wow.
I just always thought like it was this weird love triangle again. You
Yeah.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? And I was like, yo, my grandma, man, she was a different kind of person. You know what I mean? I
Mm-hmm.
felt like she felt like that's just something that happens.
It did.
So
That's not uncommon. It's not uncommon to have the Jenkins on the west side of the town and the Jenkins on the east side of the town. But again, I think what you're explaining with your grandmother was just a different mentality that we had as a community, where we did step in and take, like, everybody's got that redhead, sandy red cousin. It's like,
my
where this
grandpa,
kid come from? Where this kid come from? And it's like somebody baby from somewhere, but we end up taking folks' kids in. Like, that changed with our parents' generation. I think it shifted, and really what ended up happening, I think, when we became urbanized. I think that this is my theory. When blacks became urbanized, because your grandmother's from the South, like, she's more of a rural woman. When we became urbanized, and I think with the injunction of welfare as well, it shifted the mentality of our community. For our men, it shifted, like, you're not necessarily needed, and for our women, it gave them a false idea of empowerment. And in that urbanization, that fast-paced, get money, hustle mentality, like what happened in Detroit and things of that nature, I think that that's what really started to peak our divide across each other. Then you throw right in the middle of that the first drug epidemic of heroin, which just broke down families real bad. Then you come back with a huge uppercut of crack cocaine, and you get what we have today. And and it's like, that mentality that your grandma had, you won't see too many people, especially women, who have that mentality today. Like, oh, we're gonna just take care of all these babies. Like, that's crazy. Not saying that you should have that mentality, because that whole situation sounds traumatic. But at the same time, I can't imagine just doing that now. I like, that seems like such a far-fetched idea to say, all right, we're gonna raise all these babies together
and
because we're gonna move forward as a family.
my mom was the firstborn, so even though they couldn't get those twins, she went on to have three more children with him. So
Mm-hmm.
it was like, okay,
Wow.
yeah, you did that, but whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it just kept it moving. And so I don't know, like, it to me, I was just like, what? Like, why is she up in here? You know, stuff like that. But my grandma was never that type of person. But I know for a fact when she passed away, my grandpa, I never seen him cry in my life. And you
Wow.
talking about that redhead, that light skinned
Yeah.
redhead, you know, he don't be trying to tell us what was going on with that. But um he was like totally bawling his eyes out. And I'm looking like,
Yeah.
no, like, what's going on? Like, I didn't know. I mean, I didn't know that he felt so strongly for her. And it's like he said, it's the things that he didn't say. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So it was,
Wow.
it was powerful. And I just felt like, your grandparents sometimes, they definitely not like my parents. My
Hmm.
mom was not having that. No, she wasn't. But then at the same time, it's kind of like when I think about Africans and I think about Africa, like
Hmm.
how they have all those wives or outside children. They do try to take care of each other, but like
Raymond.
what you said, the urban kind
Yeah.
of romantic kind of movies, the Hallmark movies, and all that stuff. You
Hmm.
really do feel like, okay, we got to stand individually on our own as separate entities when we all related anyway.
Right. Man, it's such a huge issue, and I think we don't talk about it. And it goes to the comment that I just posted up. So this is such an interesting conversation. I'm hoping that we can find balance of the older generation not talking enough and the newer generation talking too much balance. And it's like, yeah, when I look at our stuff's on display. Like, we got social media, we tag and exposing people, recording videos, podcasts, all these different things. But like, our parents, they don't know. Like when Ashley Jegna started on my Facebook, my mom had said that people were asking her, like, Brandon's on Facebook telling all the family business. And, and really, I haven't told a lot. I mean, there's a lot of stuff I haven't said and I won't say. But the fact that people felt uncomfortable with me just telling my perspective on growing up said a lot. Because my mom was like, he ain't said nothing that ain't the truth. And she just like validated it, which I gave her a lot of credit for too. It's like, I ain't lying about nothing. But it's important because nobody talks about it. Like, how do you heal and move on if nobody's willing to have those discussions? So I know I have family that watch my stuff religiously. Like, they everything, they comment, they share it, they love it, and it gives a breath of fresh air. But it's important that the generations, as was said here, that we do have these conversations across generations, because in order for us to break those cycles, we need to know what happened. We need to know
Yeah.
information. part of our stories is part of our healing. It's part of our identity, and I think a lot of us are missing when we don't know who our fathers are, or our mothers haven't told us everything about why did your parents name you Aaron. Like those are important things for people to know as they move forward. And a lot of folks just don't have these conversations because it's just too much trauma, it's too painful, and we just hide the truth. And unfortunately those cycles just end up being recreated over and over and over because nobody ever wants to tell what really happened. So
I think that you bring up a good point, and so does this comment. But I also feel like, you know, maybe like I don't know if you're saying like we talk too much in the point in the context of social media, because it still feels like we're not talking about anything very
right,
in depth and
surface.
very in real. You know what I mean? Like the
Mhm.
thing is, it's just like I guess I feel so liberated by talking about my parents and my grandparents' situation, because it puts into context for me the things that I might think are super serious. Like, this is the way a marriage is supposed to work. This is the way love is supposed to work. This is the way a relationship is supposed to work. It kind of brings into context, like, hey, there's some gray areas around here. You know what I'm
Absolutely.
saying? Because
Hmm.
the thing is like if we're learning all of our lessons from TV, movies, and reality TV and all this stuff, we're gonna have a very distorted view of how
It's gonna be
people love and
bad.
how, yeah, and how people hold relationships. So it's kind of like when I think about my grandparents and I think about people in the South in general, like when I was talking about how Darius has that slow kind of patient kind of way,
Hmm.
there's tons of people that stayed together that had kids outside, even
Yep.
women. You know that whole
Yep.
saying, mama's baby, daddy's maybe. Like
Yeah.
that stuff is for real. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like I think that we need to do that, because um if not, we're going to uphold, especially in the African American community, we are indoctrinated into white supremacy, but we
Mhm.
don't have the same kind of cultural nuances that white families have when it comes
Right.
to relationships and marriage, because of our history of being enslaved in this
Right.
country. And I feel like knowing my sister and knowing that part of my family and it opening up, like I learned a lot about my dad's side of the family when I met them and went to their house and saw how regular they were. Like
Hmm.
my grandmother got all her kids adopted that were, my dad's brothers and sisters, but she had like 7 kids, got adopted by
Mm.
Jenkins. Jenkins isn't even our real last name. This
Wow.
man met my grandmother and fell in love with her and gave adopted all her kids. And he
Wow.
was a young man. I think he was like 7 years younger than her. So
Wow.
at the same time, like I feel like these stories need to be talked about, because like we can overcome things if we just work together. And
Absolutely.
I don't see that in our generations now.
Mm. Yeah, I think some of this is happening naturally, but we really have to redefine what family is and just make sure that it's healthy, man. Like I mean, I come in contact. I have people reach out to me all the time. Being a psychotherapist and having some notoriety across the country, people reach out to me for all types of stuff. But one thing is very common with most people that reach out to me: their family, their family dynamics, and their growing up was extremely traumatic. And I think, and a lot of folks have kids, and they want to know what can I do for my children so that they don't have the same trauma as me. And I think we're at a point where we really have to redefine what family is. We have to have these tough conversations. Like we have to be honest about what had happened so that we are informed enough to do something. It's what I call adaptive awareness. Once you know, you have to do something with it. And you can't hide the truth. And by reforming what family looks like, that means some of the traditional ideas we have to let some of that stuff go because it may be hurting us. It may have become a self-defeating behavior. Um, and my mentality is we really have to have some healthy enough because adults in children's lives, whether they are just men or just women, we need some healthy adults in children's lives because these children, black children, let me be specific, are drowning. They are drowning, and these systems that are set up are definitely benefiting off our dysfunction of our kids. Like it pains me that like 70% of black boys are illiterate. Like that's crazy, right? Like we have a lot of work to do, and I'm starting to shift a lot of my content and stuff to be very pro family and pro like helping young people just get better. Like that was always been kind of my mission, but like we have a lot of work to do, and it starts with our own healing. So I'm gonna stop rambling. Any final thoughts from you, Aaron, before we close out?
I guess I just want to say, like, I believe everything that you just said was absolutely correct. I am for family as well, but like you said, like we need to understand like what that means. And I feel like we can
Right,
take from the stories of our ancestors, because our parents are our ancestors,
right,
that the dysfunction, but we can pick out of the story the strength that comes with each character that is, the father, the mother, the grandmother, the grandfather, and take the strength they had in their story and their trajectory and put it into our own story. We don't have to carry the pain all the time. We can carry the
right,
goodness too. But I feel like we focus so much on the negative and the pain because, that's what it is to be black in America. Oh, the Tyler Perry tropes. Oh, strong black woman. Here we go. All over again. It's like, damn, your granddaddy and your grandma didn't do nothing right. Like sticking together, they did something right by having, expressing their love in the way that they did it. It's not gonna look
right,
the same for me.
right. Mm. Yeah, great point. Great point. So hopefully this conversation has encouraged others to have conversations as well. I appreciate you, Aaron. We're going to do the show live moving forward. So if you have comments, feel free to drop them in the chats, both on Facebook and YouTube. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Share this, share this content, because we don't start these healing conversations if people aren't brave enough to just put their stuff on the line. And I appreciate you, Aaron, for coming and sharing your perspective as well. All right, so that is going to wrap us up for today. Thanks for coming by. Be sure to share the episode and subscribe. Peace.